Hello, Hopkinton. Welcome to eHop's 12th Annual Know Your Vote Forum. My name is Elise Mihailowski, and I'm the president of eHop. Our mission is to educate, engage, and empower Hopkinton. We're glad that you're here, and we look forward to hearing from you throughout the program. Our goal tonight is to provide an overview of what we'll be voting on this year. We want to give the community a chance to ask questions and get informed about what will be at town meeting. We have a panel of town leaders here who have been working diligently for the past year. They've spent a lot of time discussing, planning, negotiating, and ultimately creating the town budget and articles for Hopkinton voters to consider. I want to thank HCAM for allowing residents the chance to tune in from home on TV and YouTube Live, which are both made possible by HCAM, so thank you. This forum is a community effort. Without all of you and without our town leaders being here, this session could not happen. I'd like to thank our panelists and special guests for graciously giving their time this evening. Thank you all so much for carving out the time tonight to answer our questions. I want to also thank all of the eHop board members for helping put this together. I'd like to now ask our panelists if they could introduce themselves before we begin.
I'm John Gelsich, Principal Planner.
I'm Nicola Vay O'Brien. I'm the Assistant Town Clerk.
I'm Charles Parquette. I'm the Treasurer Collector.
Susan Rothermick, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations.
Carol Kavanaugh, Superintendent of Schools.
Ellen Rudder, Town Moderator.
Gail Kramer, Chair of the Select Board.
Carrie Reed, Director of Public Works.
Ken Weissmantel, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee.
Elaine Lazarus, Interim Town Manager.
Jeff Rowland, Chair of the Sustainable Green Committee.
Cindy Bernardo, eHop Member and Treasurer.
Thank you. We're going to cover a lot of information tonight. If you want to dive deeper into details, all of town meeting materials are on our website at ehop.org, and we will be adding a recording of this forum on the website in the next few days. I'd like to kick off the questions by asking our town moderator, Ellen Rudder, to give us a brief overview of what to expect when we arrive at town meeting this year. Could you talk a little bit about logistics, like time and location?
Sure. So town meeting starts at 7 o'clock on May 6th. It's held at the middle school auditorium, and people should plan to get there with plenty of time because you need to sign in. And just a reminder that you can come to town meeting whether you are a voting resident or a non-voting resident. We do encourage people to come to town meeting. So you'll sign in, and then as you go into the hall, there will be a electronic, I don't even know what you call it, Nicole, but a little machine or whatever for voting. What's the name of it?
We'll be checking people in. We'll check in voters through what we call poll pads. We already have a list of voters ready, and you'll come in and give your name, and then we'll talk about what happens a little bit later tonight.
Yeah, and everybody, we will be doing electronic voting, so you will get the tool to do that when you come. It is not on the phones this year. And then at about 7 o'clock, as soon as we get a quorum, we'll start the meeting. And then as the meeting goes through, we talk through each of the articles and make sure everybody understands what the motion is, what they'll be voting for. And once the motion has been made, that's the time when residents of town can speak, and you come to the microphone, you introduce yourself with your name and your street address. And every time you come to the mic, even if you come a couple times in the evening, you need to do that so we can take a record of who's speaking. A person will have 2 minutes, and they may ask questions. They may say their opinion, and we follow town meeting time. And so town meeting time requires that the questions are directed through me. And in that formal place, I'm called Madam Moderator. So people say through you, Madam Moderator, and they ask a question. And then I can direct it to whoever would be best positioned to answer. And then we allow different people to speak as they come to the mic. And then we get to the point where we vote. And then after the vote is finalized, we move on. So that's how it will be for each of the warrant articles. You think that's the right level?
Perfect.
Okay.
So what is the quorum for this meeting?
130 or 131, do you know?
It's a little bit more.
Yeah,
140?
I think it's 131. It's 1% of the registered voters that are tallied at the end of a year ending in a 2 or a 7. So we have over 13,000 voters. I think it's 13,101, so the quorum would be 130.
100, so it's 131. So as soon as it is both 7 PM and we have 131 registered voters in the hall, we'll start the meeting. People can continue coming in. People can come in later. We know people have different obligations, so we love it if you stay the whole time, but if you come and go, we also understand that.
Thank you. Could you answer 2 questions we have? What is a consent agenda? Why do we use it? And what is a citizen's petition?
All the hard questions, okay. So the consent agenda is basically an administrative sort of tool that we have when there are things that by the rules we have to vote on, but they're not things we probably will discuss very much. So we go through the whole warrant and all the motions together and say, what are some of the most basic things? So, one example is saying that we can move a certain amount of money that we move every year from one to another fund. So we bucket all of those articles together into one consent agenda. And then that allows us, if we vote for that, it allows us to skip a handful of the articles. And this year we have 13 articles on our consent agenda. So that should allow us to kind of move into the more meaty articles more quickly. So that's the consent agenda.
And also, people can pull them off.
Yes. So I don't know exactly when we'll announce what the consent agenda articles are, but in the course of the meeting at the beginning, we'll go over it. And if there's an article that we have proposed to be on the consent agenda, but there's a person in the audience who wants to talk about it, then we will pull that article off the consent agenda and put it right back in the order that it is in the warrant. So it's just our idea of what we think can be consented on. What was the second question?
What is a citizen's petition?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Well, if a person or a few people in town have something that they want to bring forth for the whole town to consider and discuss and vote on at town meeting, they can put together a citizen's petition. And I think, Nicole, I might turn it to you for specifics.
Sure. The citizen's petition is almost the purest form of democracy you could have at town meeting. It's initiated by a member of the community. To get on the annual town meeting warrant, you need 10 signatures by registered voters in Hopkinton. To get on the special town meeting warrant, which I know we'll talk about that later, you need 100 signatures. We have citizens petitions for both styles of town meetings this year. And they can range on a variety of subjects. If you were to go to hopkintonma.gov and look at our warrant, you can see the list of citizens petitions we have.
Great, thanks.
So, speaking of citizens petitions, I think we should start with some of the ones that have been brought up this year. Article 40, rezoning of 1 Colonial Avenue. What is zoned currently, and is this a 2/3 majority vote? Why are we requesting the zoning change?
So I can answer that. John Gelsich, Principal Planner. The properties that are being taken up for this are currently zoned RA or Residence A. It is a 2/3 majority for the rezoning, and the town is not requiring or requesting this change. This is, as I said before, a citizen's petition. So certain citizens that I believe live in that area are looking to rezone the properties to be more in line with the neighboring properties that are business. And so it would be a petition to rezone them from RA to business.
The next citizen's petition for Article 52, form of government study committee. Could you please explain what it is you're requesting and why would we be interested in changing our current structure? Is there a cost associated with this? I believe, Muriel, you said you could speak. on
Yeah,
this.
I'll take a soft swing at this because I'm not a signer on the petition and we don't have somebody here who is. So again, we're not requesting this. This is a citizen's petition. I don't have information on whether or not there would be a cost to it. That would be something that would be decided about how they, if it passed and it was enacted, how the study was undertaken. I imagine there could be some cost associated with it. But I don't know any details, and I don't think anybody does. What was the first part of the question?
Just explain what it is that's being requested.
Yeah, I can, it's just a government study committee. I think it's modeled after one that we have had in the past that predates our charter. So we've had a charter form of government now for almost 20 years. So I do think that there is some conversation to be had, how that impacts what we have existing. For example, the typical experience we would have is that the charter would be up for renewal and study in a couple of years anyway. There's a process already in place. But it would be comparing, I think what the petitioners would like to do is compare our current form of government to a more city-like government. So it would make changes. I don't know how to answer what the changes would necessarily be specifically.
Okay, thank you. Article 39, MBTA Communities Act. John, could you provide a general background of the MBTA Communities Act and what it is that the state is requiring or asking of us? And why do we have to comply?
So I can do the general background and what the state is requiring, because they're kind of one and the same. The state has passed a law to require all MBTA communities, and those are all communities that are either having a train station, bus rapid transit station, light rail station, your T stations, all that kind of stuff, and then communities that are adjacent to communities with those types of things. Those are all MBTA communities, and all of those communities are categorized in certain ways. We are an adjacent community, which means that we are required to rezone at least 50 acres of land for a capacity of 750 units and an average density across the district of 15 units per acre. That doesn't mean these have to be built, it just means that there has to be zoning in place to allow for them to happen. And so that's kind of the general overview and what's required of us. There's a whole bunch of other details that we won't go into now about how we make that work. But the ZAC, the Zoning Advisory Committee, and the Planning Board have worked together to try and come up with a proposal, which is now before town meeting, that meets those criteria that the state laid out and achieves what ZAC and Planning Board are trying to achieve through this zoning process. We have to comply because it's a state law. So the first penalty, if we didn't comply, is that we would not be able to get funding under certain grants, MassWorks being a major one. There's 13 others, I believe, that we wouldn't qualify for funding for. Also, the state has said, the Attorney General's office has said that they're prepared to sue any communities that don't comply under fair housing statutes. And as we've seen with Milton, they've already done that. So they've sued Milton. It's currently going through the court system right now. We don't have a resolution on that. And so those are the reasons why we'd have to comply, or if we didn't comply, what would happen.
Thank you. HCAM also has more in-depth questions that you guys have answered on it on their website too, if anyone wants more questions or more answers on this. Okay, next, Article 19, the Hopkins School Edition. There's a bunch of questions in here, so be patient.
We're happy to answer those.
First, why do we need this? Second, what is being added in the addition and what will renovations include? Are they making any changes to parking and playing fields? Are they building more classrooms? We just voted for a new school. Why do we need this too? With the new Elmwood, that we now know is called Charleswood, school being built as a 2-4, will Hopkins become a 5-6 school or only grade 5? What is the anticipated time frame for the work to be completed? Would the time frame be to have this finished in the same time as the new 2-4 school, so grade 6 can be moved to Hopkins in the same time that grade 4 is being moved into the new school? And if you need me to repeat any of those questions.
Can you remember all of them?
Mrs. Rothermick and I did our homework, so we listed all of the questions and all the answers, so we're good. I'll start, and if there's anything that I missed, please jump in, and then I will turn this over to Mrs. Rothermick. So your first question is, why do we need this? The current configuration of the Hopkins School really allows for about 628 students, and we have all kinds of programs that happen in there. We have ESOL instruction, we have small group instruction, and so we've kind of carved out all of these small spaces to ensure the kids are getting what they need. But the maximum number of kids that an architect would tell you we should put into that space now, given the educational demands and the space, is about 628 students. Our current enrollment is 689 students, so that puts us 61 children over what the architects are sort of deeming appropriate. By 2032, they are projecting that grade 5 and 6 will have 803 students in those two grades, which is 174 students above the 628 that we are currently well suited for. So we really do need this addition on the school just for enrollment purposes, and that's before we start talking about things that are instructional in nature. So when you ask what's being added, the addition and renovations are going to include 10 classrooms in total. 6 of them will be general education classrooms that are stick-built and new. 4 of them will be the modular classrooms that come over after the completion of Elmwood, when Elmwood no longer houses students, and that comes with a cost of $1.5 million. And we are really hoping to be able to fund that not through the taxpayer, but through coming in under budget on some of these other projects. We will have 2 additional special education classrooms, a science, technology, and engineering room, 3 related arts classroom spaces, so there will be an additional art classroom, a brand spanking new gymnasium. It will be regulation size, and that's what we have now. So it's not that we're building a larger gym, and we're not building a smaller gym, we're building a replacement gym. There will be a multi-purpose space for physical education as well, which we will need just based on student enrollment numbers, and then a new space for band, chorus, and orchestra. Right now, the original building that houses those related arts, just too small. And so our kids are playing instruments and chorus is singing in our cafeteria or our gymnasium at times when kids aren't in gym, or they're taking gym outside, or they're not in the cafeteria. The cafeteria will become much larger, and there will be a larger servery, so that's really important because if we're trying to feed 803 students a day, they've got to get through those lines more quickly. The nurses' suite will become enlarged. The administrative offices will be larger. The custodial and maintenance areas will be larger, and we'll be adding ESOL classes for our students whose first language is not English. So how will all of that play out? The reason that we've decided to build a new gymnasium is that the cafeteria will sort of stay on that side of the building. A very large portion of that cafeteria will go to band, orchestra, chorus, and then we will move into what is presently the gym and create a cafeteria there. And that decision was made because all of the plumbing and the HVAC and the electrical necessary for a cafeteria was there, and it's less expensive to keep all of that right where it is. It will be existing classrooms that are renovated for the STE room, science, technology, and engineering. The heavy renovation, obviously, will be to the existing gym when we turn that into a cafeteria. Just in terms of our HVAC equipment, as we are trying to replace these things, we would like to make them electrical because many of them are at end of life. And our ceiling tiles are going to be replaced, and then we have a few other renovations that we'll be making just because they don't comply with existing code. All right, are we making changes to parking and playing fields? Yes, we are. I don't think it's any secret that all of our schools have parking constraints. We currently have 87 parking spaces at the Hopkins School. There will be 134 parking spaces with the redesign. Our parents will continue to drop off in the front of the school. The buses will continue to drop off at the back of the building. The addition is going to push out, and it will stretch out into the location that is now the current basketball courts. The outdoor area for the kids will have hardscape play, a half basketball court. There will be some play structures. There will be an open field and then a walking track that goes all the way around that grass area. The grass area will be about the size of a U10 soccer field. And so if people are wondering why we've made those kinds of recess and physical education decisions on that piece of property, it's really because our teachers have had many, many meetings with the architects, and that's what they had suggested that we put there. It's developmentally and age appropriate. I know that you asked if we were building more classrooms, but I think we've already answered that one. All right, so then you have the question of, we just voted for a new school. Will the new Elmwood, or now Charleswood School, being built as, with that being built as a 2-4 school, will Hopkins become a 5-6 school or only a grade 5 school? And I think that this one is a loaded question, because if the addition, which is the Hopkins addition renovation, which is Article 19, passes with 2/3 vote at town meeting, then yes, the Hopkins School will become a 5-6 school. And that really alleviates crowding upstream. At town meeting, people will be able to see that we have a very nice slide deck put together that will show that when you pull grade 6 out of the middle school, it frees up space, and then that allows for our high school students to use a portion of the middle school to be educated. The buildings are so physically proximal that to move between the two of them is pretty seamless. And that's super helpful if we're going to get to our 803 students by the time we reach 2032. There's no way you would get 803 students in that building today. And so the choices are really to have it be solely a grade 5 school, or to rotate a portion of grade 6 through the Hopkins School and through the middle school. That does very little to help you with your overcrowding problems upstream. And the kids do have to be rotated through, because the Hopkins School as it exists today does not have spaces for our related arts instruction. And so for kids to be able to equitably access the related arts, they could do some at Hopkins, things like music and art, but if they were going to do things like engineering and media design, those spaces exist at the middle school, and they would have to go back there for that. All right, and I will ask Mrs. Rothermick to talk about the anticipated time frame, how the construction will work.
Thank you. So the next question was, what is the anticipated time frame for the work to be completed? So again, if this passes at town meeting, construction would begin in the summer of '24. The anticipated completion date would be August of '26. And again, this is an occupied renovation, so there are many phases that would take place over those 2 years. So when it is completed in August of '26, grade 4 and 5 would remain in that building for a year. The Elmwood Charleswood project is not projected to be completed until the fall of '27. So for 27 school year, grade 4 and 5 would remain. When the Elmwood project is completed, then grade 4 would move down to the new Charleswood, and grade 6 would move into Hopkins. So that would happen during the fall of '27 is the hopeful timeframe for the Charleswood Elmwood project completion.
Thank you. Still talking about the Hopkins School, we had a question about the impact of Hopkins School project on our current bond schedule. For example, how many large capital projects are still on the debt schedule? Are the high school and Hopkins and DPW paid off?
Yes, so the estimated impact for the renovation is $471 per year per household. And that's the average household, which is valued at $852,400. We're expecting the bond to come in at an estimated rate of 4% based on the market. DPW, high school, and Hopkins are paid off right now, the buildings. And we have approximately 10 projects that are over $500,000 still on the books.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to Article 33, municipal parking.
Hold on.
We have a lot of questions about this. First, where will this be? How many spots? What if town hall is relocated? Do we still need this parking?
So this is generally what is known as the Bill's parking lot, and then the property behind it. We have, we have a rendition here. So it would add approximately 105 new spots, which would mean, I have two numbers, which would mean we have about 183 spots. Does that all sound right?
About 189.
189, okay. It, money-wise, it falls out to be approximately the same cost as the new parking that we have across the way at the development that Chuck Joseph put in. So about $15,000 per parking slot is what the appropriation committee told me, so I'm gonna assume they're correct. Remind me the other question. So it's generally behind Bill's. It does take the property that is wooded behind Bill's now, just to make that clear, and extends it out to Walcott. Is that Walcott behind us? Yes, Walcott.
The question was, what if town hall is relocated? Do we still need this?
Yeah, good question. I think that the answer is a resounding yes. We still need the parking, no matter whether the town hall is there or not. It sort of depends on what people's experience, what their assumptions are, but we hear all the time that we need additional parking. We know that, for example, town hall staff, but if they moved, that wouldn't be it. But the parking at the library is limited, and we hope, always hope, that we'll have more vibrancy and commercial traffic downtown, more walking traffic downtown, and that it will be something that people find very attractive to have. So parking has been a long-standing concern, and this is an opportunity that is really central and makes a lot of sense in downtown.
Okay, the next question somebody emailed in. Article 33 of the 2024 town meeting is similar to Article 51 of the 2019 town meeting. Motion 3 of Article 51 regarding 14 Main Street, 0 Main Street, and 10 Walcott Street for $1.56 million was defeated by 62%. Why should we support plans for the same parking lot concept in 2024 for the price of $2.975 million? Why doesn't the proposed parking plan of Article 33 show the topography of the parcels? The second dimensional image is deceiving. As discussed in length in the 2019 town meeting, the topography and potential drainage issues of the land in these parcels would impact the number of total possible parking spaces and likely increase the cost of development of the land.
Okay, so that came in today, and I didn't see it. I wouldn't have been able to answer it, even if I had seen it a couple of hours ago. But the simple truth is we haven't done a one-to-one comparison of those two different projects. But we are. I appreciate the question because it informs how we prepare for town meeting coming up. So this is to buy the property and to study and design the parking lot, if I'm speaking correctly. And so we don't have the detailed information about the topography and so forth.
So the town would purchase the parking lot after it's constructed. And so right now there's a conceptual plan. And then if town meeting decides to move forward with the project, the town would issue an RFP and would work with the owner in developing the plan and taking it through the planning board permitting process. And during that, it gets engineered, it gets designed, the stormwater is designed, and all of those, the topography and what's underneath the ground, the rock and all that kind of thing gets addressed. Where's the drainage going to go? And what buffers can be provided to abutters. So that will then be addressed through the public hearing process with the planning board.
Another question that just came in today, still about municipal parking. The articles up for approval ask the townspeople to absorb a significant amount of funding to support critical town needs. Please explain why 3 million of the town's free cash is best spent on a parking lot with no identified return on investment versus defraying the cost of the proposed critical items and others, such as the new school buildings that were approved in the fall. Is this a fiscally responsible request?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I think that the answer is, it is a really fiscally responsible idea to use free cash, one-time money for a one-time expense. It certainly could be used for a different one-time expense, so that's a judgment call. I do think that we will look at speaking to the ROI. I don't think that that's going to be hard to do. I didn't prepare for that for tonight. But again, we are always looking for parking downtown. It is at a real premium, and we hope, right, we always hope that we're going to have more traffic and more need for parking in order to support what we hope will be a revitalized downtown and more businesses. And also, we know that there's more, potentially more housing planned as well. So some parking that was or wasn't available will certainly not be available if that, for example, if the Hopkins and Drug property goes to its proposed development, there won't be parking there. Elaine, did you want to add anything to?
Yeah, I just want to add that as a downtown, it's nice to have a place where you can park and walk to multiple businesses at once. And we'd like to get to that point where that's possible for people. They can park and then enjoy downtown, go to the library and various businesses without moving their vehicle.
And our last question about municipal parking. Before making a decision to proceed with approving this article, it's critical to understand if the infrastructure in and around Walcott Street and the accompanying streets in the neighborhood are narrow, partially one-way, and dense with people, most importantly children. They are already ingress and traffic concerns in its current state. Has there been an environmental and land safety study done on the impact of this about 188 vehicles flowing through this dense area? Has it been determined that this neighborhood can withstand this type of volume? Is this the most appropriate safe location, or is this just an opportunistic request based on motivated sellers of adjacent properties?
Cannot speak about people's motivation, other than ours, noting that it's a prime spot for us to have additional parking. All of the considerations that were asked in that question are part of the planning process and will have to be addressed. And safety is always, paramount. So it will have to be designed to be accommodated and safe in that area. But that work has not yet been done.
And I just want to add that those driveways onto Main Street would remain, so people would not have to exit out the back. They could definitely come and go the way they're coming today.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Okay, moving on from parking.
Oh, thank goodness.
Article 38, the CPC Historical Society. What changes are going to be made?
Okay, I'll take that one. This is one of 10 projects that the Community Preservation Committee is recommending that town meeting approve. And specifically, that's one of our larger ones this year. The Historic Society building suffers from a very leaky basement, to the point where on a good rainstorm, they'll get maybe 50 gallons of water on the floor. And so it needs a lot of, I'll say, subsurface improvements, waterproofing, gutters, everything to try to keep the water out of our historic artifacts, some of which are stored in the basement. They'd like to store a lot more than the basement and preserve those. And it is there's some more drainage that's going out to the street, et cetera. I mean, it's a fairly large project, but most of it is underground. And this building is a former school. It was a two-classroom school way in the day. So at one point, we did fit in a bunch of small two-classroom schools.
Thank you. For the Green Committee, Article 36, Specialized Stretch Energy Code. There's a few questions here. Why is this being brought up again? Have you gained any new information since special town meeting? Does this affect additions to your existing home? What if you could not put solar on your roof due to so many trees nearby? What does this new code have that's different from our current stretch energy code? How many cities/towns have adopted it?
Great, good questions, thank you. So frankly, we could have done a better job explaining the changes in November. Residents asked some really good questions, but they were open to us, going back, gathering more info, and coming back in May for reconsideration. So really, thank you for them asking those. Since then, we've learned more. We've talked to the state quite a bit. We've learned more about costs and incentives. We've had a number of outreach events throughout the past couple of months, talking to the select board, planning board, a whole bunch of one-on-one conversations. We held a webinar. We're speaking tonight. We talked to 200 plus families yesterday at the Sustainable Green Committee's annual recycling event. So we're really trying to get the word out there about what this is. And we're really bringing this back because it's so important to our emissions. In Hopkinton, about half of our emissions come from buildings, and those continue to grow every time we add a new building that's using fossil fuels. So the specialized code aims to get new construction net zero ready. So we feel that this can have one of the largest impacts that we as a community can make towards achieving our net zero goals. This also can help us be eligible for more grants as a climate leader throughout the state. Next, I'll jump into a couple questions ahead to kind of give an overview what the specialized energy code is, and I think that'll help answer some of the intermediate questions. So the specialized energy code is an amendment to our current code, aiming to get us net zero ready. It's just a few pages, actually, in both the residential and commercial codes. It is only for new construction, so a few key things. It's only for new construction, and if that new construction uses fossil fuels, then it requires pre-wiring for future electrification, and it requires a certain amount of solar. Okay, so new construction only. If you're doing an addition or a renovation to existing buildings, no impact. Those stay on our current code. New construction only. Next up, fossil fuels. But first, actually, if you are going to build something all electric, then that remains under our current code. No changes per the specialized code. And one thing we've learned since then is there's at least $20,000 in incentives for new construction that's going all electric. So really help bring the cost down there. All right, now fossil fuels. If you're using fossil fuels in new construction, requires pre-wiring. So pre-wiring means that the wires are there to enable switching to electrification in the future. So for example, if you have a gas stove in the new house, there also needs to be a 240 outlet there to switch to an electric stove in the future. You can still use the gas, but you have to have the wire there. So you need that for cooking, water heating, HVAC, and clothes drying. So worst case, we're looking at 4 240 extra outlets there. In most cases, this is going to be less than. Most new homes are going to have an air conditioner anyways. They'll already have that wire. So as far as pre-wiring, it's a pretty nominal cost addition for a new home. The other thing is solar requirement for new construction. In the last 15 years, 91% of new construction in Hopkinton has been single-family homes under 4,000 square feet. So the vast majority are in that case. For those, they will require a minimum 4 kilowatt installation of solar panels. Now, what does 4 kilowatts look like? Area-wise, that's about 230 square feet of roof. Not a ton of space. Cost-wise, can vary quite a bit. It could be anywhere from $0 via a lease or power purchase agreement or a zero down loan, all the way up to fully purchasing the panels. Our estimates show that for a 4 kilowatt installation, we're looking in the ballpark of $10,000, which is a decent amount of money, right? But something to think about is that over time, that takes about, I think, 5 to 8 years generally for payoff in terms of your electrical savings. So after those first few years, you're looking at the homeowners are saving money every year beyond that from adding those solar panels right up front. And most new homes in Hopkinton around that size are at least $750,000. So we're looking at probably 1.25% potential added cost to homes in that range. Another question, well, I think I answered the additions question. So again, only new construction. If you're modifying your current home, this has no impact on you. The other question was shading for trees. So they're in that category of homes under 4,000 square feet. There's an exemption if you have an exceptional amount of shading there. And lastly, we had how many cities and towns have adopted it? So as of right now, it's 34 Massachusetts municipalities have adopted the specialized code. And that, let's see, that includes similar towns to us: Acton, Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, Sherburne, Wellesley, Ashland, and Westboro, I believe, are considering it soon. We've talked to them about it. By population, it's more interesting. 26% of the state population is already under the specialized code. It's really gotten a lot of adoption within the first year. So we're hoping to be one of those as well. And one thing I just wanted to emphasize again is the grant opportunities here. So in 2010, Hopkinton adopted our current code, which is called the stretch code, and that helped qualify us as a green community within the state. So green communities qualified us for grant money. And since then, Hopkinton's achieved or received more than $1 million in grants for energy efficiency improvements. Things like LED lighting, HVAC controls, HVAC studies to improve our efficiencies. And every one of those over time has helped save us money in every subsequent year. The specialized code can help qualify us for a program called the Climate Leaders Group. We've heard some initial summaries from our state contacts on this. The Climate Leaders is going to be larger and more flexible class of grants. So potentially we could apply these towards more solar panels on schools, the geothermal heat pumps that we're talking about in some of our other buildings. So again, more opportunities for saving us money down the road. And one last thing, the specialized code, if enacted, would go into effect January 1st, 2025. So we've got some time to roll it out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Article 42 and 43, bylaw change, more rights for non-citizens. Muriel, could you
Yeah.
explain this? What are the new rights that are being proposed?
So some of our committees require that individuals be registered voters in order to be put on those committees. So any elected official has to be a registered voter. But for the committees and boards that are appointed, a small number of them, the Appropriations Committee, the Capital Improvement Committee, and the Community Preservation Committee, in a couple of instances, the members at large, community members, previously needed to be registered voters. And so this bylaw would make it possible for us to, the select board, or whoever is the appointing authority, to appoint individuals who are not necessarily registered voters, but are residents here in Hopkinton. So it's a first step, an important step in getting residents who are not able to be registered voters the opportunity to serve the community in ways that they are interested in serving.
Great, thank you. Article 35, legislative petition for seniors tax exemptions for school building project costs.
I'm sorry, can I go back? Because I didn't do 43.
Oh, sorry.
No, that was my fault. So 42 is committee membership. 43 is admission to town meeting hall.
Oh,
My apologies. So this is another important step in allowing people to have more access. And so previously, I think it was a little bit more cumbersome to consider the folks that are not registered voters in Hopkinton being in the hall. But now with electronic voting, it's less of a management concern. So just thinking ahead to a potential question going forward. If we didn't have electronic voting and we had to go to paper voting, we can still do that. We would still have to have folks in marked off seating. Preferential seating would be given to registered voters, but we can still have folks that live in town that aren't necessarily registered voters be able to attend town meeting and speak on issues that in fact impact them and affect them and interest them at town meeting. And we, when people come into town meeting, maybe the assistant town clerk can jump in too, they will keep a list of the registered voters and the non-registered voters, the residents who are attending as non-registered voters. So if there's any issues or concerns during the night, or we have to make an adjustment if electronic voting fails, which it won't. Which it won't. But we will have, with the town clerk is responsible for making sure we keep those records straight.
We already have those lists on hand. We're able to pull a variety of different reports from our voter registration software that can determine, if someone is a non-voting resident or a voting resident. And we can certainly work with one of our vendors in the future to figure out if we can put that all into one list to have that available digitally for our poll workers. But if not, elections operated for hundreds of years with paperless. We can do that for non-voting residents as well.
Thank you. So for Article 35, senior tax exemptions for school building project costs.
Yep.
Muriel, did you want to speak on that?
Yep, happy to do that. So this is an attempt to begin the conversation to try to defray some of the burden of particularly big school projects for senior residents who are most impacted and are most income stressed, I would say. So this article would authorize the select board to submit a petition to the state legislature to allow the town to establish a means-tested senior property tax exemption for school building construction projects. So the intent obviously is to grant exemptions for the cost of borrowing for schools for seniors who are low income, recognizing the tax burden on those residents. Typically also residents that have invested into the town for a great many years, but it is means tested, not necessarily how long you've lived here tested. The anticipated cost of the exemptions that are outlined for this article is about $34,000. It's a small segment of the population. It's folks that already qualify for 41C exemptions and circuit breaker exemptions. They're all means tested. 41C recipients, there's 11. And circuit breaker recipients, there are 16, 2 of which qualify for both exemptions. So it's a very small start, and it's meant to alleviate some of the burden for the most needy residents that are seniors.
Thank you. Just gonna jump around here a little. Okay, going to Article 38, CPC. What are the land purchases for, and how will they be funded?
Okay, the land purchases, we are purchasing two properties. We have two willing sellers this year. Finding willing sellers is sometimes very difficult. Both of these properties will be used for open space and probably trails, which is allowed in our open space. The properties will be held by the Open Space Commission. There's two properties. One is owned by the Kalala family, which is adjacent to the Hughes trails off of 85 or Hayden Row. And the back, it abuts the Hughes, and it also abuts about 12 homes right on Teresa Road, left as you're going in Teresa Road. So the first, 12 or so homes, that piece of property is right behind them. The other one is a piece of landlocked property owned by the Larders, and it's on the east side of 495, right behind Daniel Shea's, primarily behind that area. And it's landlocked. It'll be, I think there's a couple local trails through those property there. And how is it being purchased? It's being used for CPC funds. Open space is one of our 4 allowable uses for open space funds.
Thank you. For the inclusive playground study, where would this be, and how is it different from other playgrounds in town?
Well, I think maybe Susan and I can both kind of take this. School committee, school department asked for funding for a playground at Marathon School, and our committee looked at it and said, can you broaden the scope? Meaning maybe the age is more than just the age limit that's at Marathon School. And also we said, is Marathon School the right place to have it? We don't really know, but we'd like to see it serve a little bit larger community. And so we, instead of giving them the whole amount of money, the third question I think our committee had was, is $1 million the right number for it? And it could be that much. It could be a lot less. Some schools have, or some communities have built inclusive playgrounds for $300,000 or $400,000. Just depends on how much equipment you want, and what the land looks like, and what parking, and what all the stuff you might have to do with it. So we said, let's break it into 2 spots. Let's do some engineering so that probably next year we can come with a really good plan with some really reasonable numbers on it. And I believe, Susan, you're running the committee that started the study. We put a liaison onto that committee, and we've gotten glowing reports on their first 2 meetings. So we as a CPC committee are very happy with what we're seeing on this process. And who knows where it's going to be, but maybe, I think you were studying 100 and something town-owned properties. But Susan, go ahead.
Thank you. That's a good introduction. So, taking the charge from CPC, this article is for money for the design and engineering for an adaptive playground. So what we did is put together a committee, a study committee from all facets of the community, residents, some department heads, Commission on Disabilities. And what we have done and started to do is look at all of the town-owned parcels, look at parcels that may already have parking, driveways, and try to narrow down the number of parcels that would be feasible location. We've talked about who would be the customers for this playground, when are they available, and all of this will then go in to inform a designer. So we'll go out for a bid for a designer, and we will feed the information that comes from the committee, and then that person will do some work, put together some thoughts and ideas, but the big part of that too is to develop a cost. So that designer will be the one who will help the group to determine the location. So the location is not determined yet. And that designer will help to put together that process. And as Ken said, we have a liaison from CPC, so we'll continue to bring the information back to CPC for them to approve of the process. And I'll let Dr. Kavanaugh speak a little bit more about what exactly that means to be an adaptive playground.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So we have two terms that we typically use. One is ADA compliant and the other is ADA accessible. And if something is ADA accessible, it really fosters inclusivity, which means it takes into account kids' physical, intellectual, sensory disabilities, all of that. And so when we're thinking about an inclusive playground, in the designing process, we are thinking about how does this fit the needs of all kids. And when we say all, we probably don't mean 100%, but we're looking at things like 80 or 85%. So for example, if you had children who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, for example, or a sensory processing disorder, sometimes those children need just a nice quiet place at the playground to be able to sit and regroup in a place that's, cozy and quiet. Children who have a physical disability may not be able to access a ladder or a climbing structure that would get them to the top of a slide, but if you had a truly accessible and inclusive playground, they would be able to get from their mobility device onto that slide via a ramp or perhaps regrading of the land. A very easy way, I think, to think about it is if you had a playground that had wood chips, for example, in the base, that might be ADA compliant. But if it has that foam base on which you can have a wheelchair, and there are lots of safety features with that, then what you have is something that is truly accessible. And so we were talking about it this afternoon, and we were wondering, is there a truly accessible, inclusive playground in the town of Hopkinton? And if there is, we really don't know about it. So that's, I think, why there are people in the Special Education Parents Advisory Council in the school district who think of this as a very important project. And so we appreciate the partnership with the CPC.
Thank you for explaining that. Okay, Article 16, number 7, Fruit Street Garage. What is this for? What will be stored there?
I can answer that. It's an existing garage on the town's Fruit Street property, right as you enter the property heading back toward the athletic fields. It's an old garage, and this article is to replace the overhead doors. The building is used for general municipal storage of vehicles and other equipment, and it would continue to be used for that.
Okay. We have a couple general questions, which I think Nicole can take. Will we be using electronic voting this year? And how can voters be confident their vote is accurately counted? Will there be training opportunities for residents leading up to the meeting, or if they arrive early at the meeting, can they test their clicker?
Great. Yes, we will be using electronic voting this year at town meeting. We are once again, for those who have gone to our special town meeting in November, we used a system by Meridia. We are using the same system. I brought a little clicker with me. You will be able to test your clicker at the start of town meeting. It's almost going to look like a bingo hall when you walk in, or like a flight departure board. Each clicker has a number in the back of it. And you will be able to go up to the projector, and you can just walk right up to as close as you need to if you have eyesight issues, and toggle through the buttons, which are typically just going to be yes and no. Those are going to be the ones that are activated for our meeting. And it will show your number on the screen if it scrolls through, and you'll be able to see it toggling back and forth between the yes and the no. If you have an issue and your clicker is not doing that, there are going to be plenty of spares, and it's a very simple battery that we can change with. But the life cycle of these batteries in the clickers is 6 months to a year. So that's how you can tell that your vote will be accurately counted. Show up early, test the clicker. Last year, we did have a few trainings scheduled. They weren't very well attended. Our clerk's office would be happy to schedule trainings, but we just need to know that the interest is there. So please reach out, townclerk@hopkintonma.gov, and we can get something on the books. And lastly, I've had our IT department update our town meeting page with the promotional video we used last year on operating the clickers. So if you have any questions about that, you can go over there. It will still say the 2023 special town meeting. It's the same system. And if you do have any more questions, feel free to reach out to our office.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any data stored from the clickers? Would you know who voted for what on
No.
which?
No.
Okay.
When you get handed, so to keep track of the clickers last year, because they're not free, we did start to check in a person's name with their clicker number, but it won't record what clicker votes yes or no. This year, to save time, we're not doing that at all. So you'll be handed a clicker. It won't correspond to your name. And at the end, I think if you watch a promotional video, it will just show how many people voted yes on an article and how many people voted no. Yes will be this one button, no will be the second button, yes is green, no is red. And if you want to abstain, I didn't mention this, don't do anything. Once you select something on your clicker, you can't unselect it. It's a bell that you cannot unring. You can choose yes or no, but you can't choose no voting. So just be prepared to, if you're ready to vote on an article, be prepared to either vote yes or no. And an abstain is just nothing.
Seems simple enough.
Thank you.
I say that jokingly because there's always going to be a problem.
It did go well, though. So,
Yeah.
When is the last day to register to vote in order to vote at town meeting?
Unfortunately, the last day to register to vote for the annual town meeting was this past Friday, April 26th at 5 p.m. The reason being that, especially for the town meeting, and it's the registration date for the election, they're both tied together. It's one big event, even though it seems like two separate events. So it is now too late to register for the local election as well, but you can always register to vote, and you will be eligible for our elections in September and in November. Those are state level elections.
Thank you. Why are we having both an annual town meeting and special town meeting in the same week? What is the difference?
All right. I have looked this up. It's in our charter. And the annual town meeting, the warrant is open. Committees can submit their articles. And that warrant gets closed 90 days. I'm not sure if it was 90 days before the actual election or the town meeting, but it is 90 days prior to the date fixed by the town bylaw for town meeting to convene. So what happened is the warrant for the annual town meeting closed, but the select board, in other towns, the select board can reopen the warrant. In Hopkinton, the select board can call a special town meeting. So there were still unfinished articles or articles that needed to be submitted that came in post the 90 days. The select board's able to call a special town meeting, which then opened up that warrant and allowed for another citizen's petition to come through as well. So it's almost like they're one within the other.
Okay. Thank you. It's a little confusing.
There's a hard deadline for the annual town meeting warrant, but if not all town business is taken care of, you can open up a special town meeting to happen within the annual town meeting. And that's the way to get around it.
Great. Thank you. Which brings us to some of our special town meeting articles. From Citizens Petition, special town meeting, article number 5, appoint Sergeant Timothy J. Brennan. The questions we have: what is being requested? Would this be a binding article? Would it be in line with the police union's collective bargaining agreement?
So, again, I'm not a signer on the petition, just speaking to it to the best that I can. Our attorney has verified for us that it is not a binding article. So because it's a citizen's petition, it automatically goes on a warrant as long as all the requirements are met, and it will be discussed and it will be voted. And does not have, it's not binding on the select board to act in the ways that it outlines. One of your questions was whether it was in line with the contract, and I don't have that information,
Okay.
but my guess is no.
What is it being requested, I guess?
It's being requested that he will be, again, for the two citizens petition articles that I spoke to, there is no motion yet, just to be clear. So I don't have their motion, but it is to appoint Timothy J. Brennan of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, to the rank of sergeant in the Hopkinton Police Department, and he would resume the same or substantially similar duties performed during his prior employment with the department. It's to reinstate Sergeant Brennan.
Okay, thank you. For the town manager's office, what are the participatory budgeting items this year? Which groups propose them?
Okay, so we have a few participatory budget items. Just recall that there was a call for proposals for capital projects, and about 10 were received. And what will be funded this year are 2 ADA accessible exit doors and a fence at the amphitheater area at the Hopkins Center for the Arts, Black Earth composting starter kits for residents, pollinator gardens at the Hughes Farm and Pratt Farm conservation areas, and turtle crossing signs. So the HCA did propose the ADA improvements and the fence. The Black Earth composting kits, actually 2 proposals were received for basically an identical thing, one from a subcommittee of the Sustainable Green Committee and one from a resident. And the pollinator gardens and the turtle crossing signs were from children.
I love that.
Cool.
For Article 23, townwide water main flushing. What is this for, and will it improve the water discoloration issues?
So this is intended to improve the water discoloration issues and to improve water quality. It's recommended that towns do a flushing program. We recently did one on a portion of the town that was most affected by discoloration, and this will allow us to do a townwide program. We're trying to do a unidirectional program, which requires us to look at the whole system. It will be more effective, use less water, but we need a little bit of help with that, looking at our mapping and our infrastructure. And so this funding will help us both do the planning for this and then actually conduct the flushing event.
Thank you. Looks like we got some questions in later, some general questions. If someone needs accommodations to participate in town meeting, such as closed captions or large print or priority seating, who should they contact?
So we, at every town meeting, we do have priority seating in the front. That's for those with disabilities, or need accessibilities. And then if you were right now to go to hopkintonma.gov, right at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen is a town meeting link. You can click on that, and there is an accessibility request form. And so an individual can fill that out on a case-by-case basis, and the town would be in touch with them as to what sort of accommodations can be provided. I don't know if anyone wants to call. Should they be calling your office, Elaine, or should they be calling ours?
They should call our office.
All right, so you would be calling the town manager's office then, if you need to make an accessibility request by the phone.
And I just want to add that we do have closed captioning for the first night, for May 6th. We don't yet have anyone who's agreed to do the 7th, but we're still looking for someone. So there will be closed captioning for the first night.
Okay, thank you. Next question, will there be babysitting available at town meeting this year?
I've been told that this is a work in progress by Hopkinton. Is it PTO or PTA?
HPTO.
HPTO, okay. So there should be a more definitive answer by tomorrow, April 30th, but right now it is still pending.
Why are there different voting requirements for different articles? Some just need a majority vote, while others need 2/3 to pass. One even needs 4/5 this year.
Is that to me?
Sure, you want to take it?
Yeah, I believe it has to do with authorizing spending. Is that right, Elaine? So anything that's authorizing a spend would be the 2/3. And other types of votes are simple majority. One thing we try to do, as we're talking about each motion, is explain what the vote requirement is for each one, because it's of course a little different.
Often zoning is typically 2/3 as well.
Zoning.
However, the MBTA zoning is not.
No,
It's
that's simple.
unusual, right.
That's simple majority.
So some rules that people are accustomed to are going to be a little bit different potentially this year.
Yeah.
And the 4/5 is for the unpaid bills of a prior fiscal year. It's a statutory requirement.
Great. Okay. We have a question from Facebook on Article 35, the school construction cost savings for seniors. The question is, have any other towns successfully implemented this? Also, would it apply retroactively to school projects already approved, like the Elmwood replacement?
So I'm going to phone a friend. I believe we intended it to be applicable retroactively to the Elmwood replacement. Is that correct?
That is the intent.
Yes. So that would have to be allowed by the legislature. And then have other towns enacted it successfully? So I don't have that. I don't know, Elaine, if you do. I suspect that is true, that other towns have done it, but I don't know.
Done some research, and town council did research, have not found any that did exactly this same thing.
Other states have done very similar things and more expansively, but that's good information.
Great. We've got an email question about the Hopkins School Addition. This project is said to solve enrollment issues at the high school by use of vacant space at the middle school. Please describe the process in which high school students will access that space without compromising student safety or either building's most basic security features of locked outside doors and single points of entry.
Sure. Thank you, I can take that one. So I think people know just how physically close the high school and the middle school are. And there is a doorway that leaves the related arts area of the high school, and it's very easy to go from there to access the library area of the middle school. Maybe that's just the best way to define it if you're familiar with those two buildings. So the plan would not be to move sixth graders out until we at least got to 2027, and those security procedures are really still under discussion. And I understand why parents are asking that question, because parents and guardians' concerns about student safety are things that we have to take paramount. I mean, I think student safety is the most important thing that we do. So we are going to continue to work on this. The plan is that potentially students could access the middle school using their ID. That's the way teachers and administrators and paraprofessionals get in now. We simply have a fob and we can open the door. But the kids are constantly at least leaving the high school and going out and using the fields during the day. They're out in the parking lot because they have senior and junior privileges. They kind of come and go. So there are always people out around those buildings, and the egress and entry that we're talking about really wouldn't ever put a kid more than about 10 feet from the perimeter of any of those schools. So it's not as if they are out on the outside. So we're going to continue to work on that. You know that we have cameras in place. We have faculty observers who are, always sort of available to us, and we'll continue to work on that to make sure that if kids are going from the high school to the middle school and then back from the middle school to the high school, that there's a safe way for them to be able to move seamlessly between the buildings.
Thank you. Another emailed question for the schools. The fiscal year 25 MSBA enrollment forecast is 4,490 students for K through 12, which is an increase of over 360 students above current enrollment. Is that growth what we typically see year over year? How many students did we gain between June 2023 and present day?
Okay, so I think that this person, what they're asking about are the MSBA demographers numbers. And I think we have to be a little bit careful with those numbers, because when we look at them, there's a row at the very beginning, a column that talks about the projected numbers of births in Hopkinton. There's a row that talks about 5-year cohort survival rate. And then as they're working with those numbers, they're putting into that graph what we might call build numbers. The important numbers are the ones that come down at the bottom, because those are the 10-year projected averages, and those are the ones that we're using to sort of project where the Hopkins School would be in the year 2027. So, for example, or, you know, at the opening time, by 2032. So when we looked at that, when we were making the decision about the Elmwood School, for example, and we said, should it be a 2-3 school or should it be a 2-3-4 school? And then we said, well, let's see what Hopkins would look like. If it were a 4-5 school in 2032, it would be an 802 student school. If it were a 5-6 school in 2032, it would be an 803 student school. So the number, really, in terms of students, whether 4-5 or 5-6, was fairly negligible. So as we are looking at those numbers, we take that 10-year average, and that's the one that we use. By 2032, the MSBA predicted that we would have 4,975 students in the school. If you go down that column, and I think this is the one that the questioner is referring to, those numbers go up and down quite a bit. In fact, some of them get like way into the mid-5,000s, but we're looking at the number that says 4,975. Just to be clear about some of the other numbers that we use Dr. Wagman's numbers. We talk about those very frequently. If we took his pre-K, the pre-K to 12 numbers, he would have predicted 4,249 for the 23-24 school year. And if we are right now, hold on, I have to go back to this because I was just writing all this down and now I've confused myself. If we are talking about Dr. Wagman's predictions for this year, and he's including the pre-K, he would say that we would be at 4,186. If we look at our actual numbers and we include the pre-K for this year, we're at 4,249. So substantially more if we're looking at those Wagman numbers. Currently, we have 4,135 students, and that's without the pre-K, and that's about 41 students ahead of where we were in June of 2023. So I've gone a long way to say that we look at an awful lot of numbers, and our demographers tell us all the time that those numbers are like catching smoke. And for years, we were using cohort survival only, and I think that that's what kind of got our district into trouble. I think that might have been what kind of set us behind the 8 ball a little bit in terms of marking student enrollment and trying to figure out where we were. In December of 2019, when Mrs. Rothermick and I went before town meeting and asked for 6 classrooms at the high school, 4 at Elmwood, and 4 at Hopkins, putting those additions on were only to accommodate the students who are here in front of us now. And the same thing happened when we put the 4 classrooms that were just completed at Marathon School. Those are just to accommodate the kids who are here now. So I'm happy to continue to talk with folks about what these numbers look like, but we have to be very cautious not to say that those are expected numbers. The Wagman numbers are more expected. The MSBA does a 10-year average, and so those are typically build numbers that you see inside the grid. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Anything I missed on that?
Nope.
Just bear with me, we're getting questions coming in right now.
Good.
Back to the home rule petition for school construction. Some of these have already been answered, but out of the 4,000 plus households in Hopkinton, how many households would this exemption actually help?
About 25.
Next question is for MBTA Communities Act. Will this allow for mixed-use development, including first-floor commercial? And can you speak to how the locations were selected?
Sure. So the MBTA Communities overlay would not allow for mixed use. There are 2 districts, the Upper Cedar Street District, which includes the two residential lots adjacent to Carboni's and Carboni's, and then the Preserve Condominium Association, and then the downtown subdistrict. In the downtown subdistrict, mixed use with ground floor retail and residential above is already an allowed use. So that's already allowed under the underlying zoning. So MBTA would not change that, it would still be allowed. And then MBTA would not introduce that same use in the Upper Cedar Street district, it would just be residential. The locations were selected through the Zoning Advisory Committee and confirmed by Planning Board. The Zoning Advisory Committee held about 9 public meetings where they reviewed potential parcels and narrowed that down to the ones that were selected in the 2 sub-districts.
Thank you. Seeing as we don't have any more questions coming in currently, I'm going to jump to some ballot questions. Question 1, paper records digitized. Will this be done in-house or will we be hiring a company? How long will it take? Will we need to store the originals? And where will we store the originals? Will the digital copies be backed up? What if the server goes down? Is it secure?
So the IT director could answer all those questions. I can answer a few of those. It will be a vendor. And currently, they're doing a pilot project with the health department records and to look at how it's going to work and how things are going to be stored and to be found. I don't know how long it will take. Some of the originals statute requires you to hold on to some things forever. For example, an approved subdivision plan must be retained forever. But many of the records that the town stores don't have to be stored, and they can be destroyed. I don't know the answer as far as where to be backed up, but it will be secure, and they also will be available to the public. So it'll be easier to obtain copies of records just through the town's website.
Great. Okay. Question 2, HPS HVAC. Can you specify which schools need their HVACs to be replaced? The question is vague.
I can answer that. So annually, we typically do have an article on the town meeting. It's part of just a regular end-of-life replacement cycle for the HVAC for all the schools. This particular article is aimed at the Hopkins School. It will be for replacement of 3 of 9 units. Of course, when you say the number 3, when you go out to bid, you don't know if you can actually cover 3. It could be 2. We'll see how that goes. However, if the Hopkins addition does pass, we'll replace these units with electric and tie them into the new building, and we would be able to move away from fossil fuel. Currently, they all run on gas. If it does not pass, then these will continue to just be a one-for-one replacement of gas.
Okay. That leads us to our next question about the Hopkins edition. You guys did a wonderful job covering most of the questions that are here already. But somebody would like to know, what is the total estimate for the project? And how many students is the new completed school planning to accommodate, and is it big enough?
You can do the cost.
So I'll speak to the cost. When you look at the article, there are several pieces to it, if you will. So I want to walk through exactly what we're looking for. So the total remaining project funds that are needed is $48,550,000. There are several prior projects that have come in under the original appropriation. Some is unissued but authorized debt, and some is just an unspent appropriation. So, for example, the addition to the high school came in under $465,000. The roof replacement for the Hopkins and middle school came in under $405,000. The Marathon edition came in under 425,000. And the Elmwood feasibility study, because we received MSBA reimbursement for that, there is 353,000 additional unspent appropriation. So the total of all that is, we're looking to reallocate that, which is 1,648,000 toward that 48,550,000. So the new debt funding request is $46,902,000. However, to throw a further wrinkle in there, if the HVAC article does pass, which is the article just preceding, so Article 18 is the HVAC replacement of $700,000. If that passes and the Hopkins passes, that $700,000 is actually already included in the $46,902,000. So, because you can't write the motion that way, you see a gross new funding request of $46,902,000, but the actual borrowing could be less.
Okay.
And I'll
So,
let Carol speak to the size.
So as you know, we're building this school, or we're putting on an addition and doing a renovation for just over 800 students. And again, we're doing that because those are the best projections that we have right now. And it is a little bit curious that we have some folks who will say, I think you're building a school that's too big, and we have other people who are wondering if we're not building a building that is big enough. One of the nice things about public education is that when you have, so for example, right now in grade 5, we have 16 classrooms, and in grade 4, we have 14 classrooms. If you had 23 kids in each one of those spaces, you could absorb 16 fifth graders before you had to go to a 25th student, for example, in a classroom. So there are nice ways in our classrooms to be able to continue to absorb kids. The problems start to happen, and you can see what's happening here with Hopkins, is that you don't have enough cafeteria space, and you just don't have enough gymnasium space, and you don't have enough art classroom space. And I'll leave you with this just very quick anecdote. So if I'm the art teacher and I have one art room, and I am teaching in that room 6 periods a day, 5 days a week, my contract says I can teach up to 30. So when we get to the need to have a 31st art class in a week, and you know we have 16 fifth grade and 14 fourth grade, so every one of those classrooms goes to art right now. If we needed to open up another classroom, we don't have one, but if we had to do that, you would have to hire another art teacher or ask that person to teach one period outside the contract. Because of the numbers of kids that we're predicting, there's no way that you can make that building work with just one art classroom anymore. You're going to have 2 art classrooms. So we do believe that there will be absorption space for things like the related arts and the cafeteria. And hopefully that number of classrooms that we have, the 10 additional classrooms that are going in, will be enough to sustain us. That's what we have, our demographers have projected, and that's what we believe is adequate.
okay. So, going back to the financial aspect, if at town meeting, the HVAC and Hopkins both get voted yes, for the town ballot, would that have to change the amount, or would it stay the same in requests, and then the actual amount you're requesting would?
So, the ballots don't have the amounts, right? For this very reason, because often the numbers change a little bit. So the ballots are necessary votes, but there's no fixed amount associated with it. But there will be information to tell people exactly what dollars are associated with their yes or no votes.
That would be, I believe, town meeting passes the financial portion, the dollar
Right.
amount.
Yep.
And then the ballot question is the actual override itself.
And the town meeting vote is a 2/3 vote. We talked about that before. The ballot vote is a simple majority.
Yes.
Great. For ballot question number 4, drainage improvement on Ash Street and Fenton Street.
That's me. I think I get all the rest of them, guys. So the question is, what is the reason for doing this work? Currently, we have flooding in the roadway that's causing a public safety concern, both for motorists traveling, and as anybody knows, Ash Street is a lot of traffic. And we also have some concerns, public safety concerns for pedestrians who are using the sidewalk, specifically in the wintertime with icing. It's a real concern, so that's why it was a priority. There's also some damage to the road and some other auxiliary thing, but the number one reason we're doing this is, to improve public safety. And then the second part of that question is will this cover the repaving after the work is done? The project funds will cover repaving within the work area, but is not intended to do a curb-to-curb repaving on Ash Street or Fenton Street.
Thank you. And question 5, DeCarlo, Barbara, and Peppercorn. Are these replacements or new sidewalks? And why were these streets chosen? And will the roads need to be repaved after?
So I'll start with the why were the streets chosen. The town has a pavement management plan that informs us of which roads are in the worst conditions, the best conditions, and which ones should be replaced when, to help us prioritize, because there's obviously more roads we'd love to have repaved than we have funding available. We never have enough funding to do all the roads that we really need to do according to the pavement management plan. So this approach is to take a neighborhood approach and look at it as an integrated approach. Our Chapter 90 funding that we get from the state, we've been using mostly to do resurfacing curb to curb. What we're recognizing, especially in these subdivision neighborhoods that were approved in maybe the 90s and the 2000s, the sidewalks were also put in, asphalt sidewalks, asphalt roads. They've been deteriorating about the same time. So we're taking an integrated approach to do the road while we're doing the roads, which were identified, these ones, as being in poor condition, also to replace the sidewalks, go to ADA compliance, which you heard about earlier, and also look at any other infrastructure within the roadways that may need to be replaced, because what we see, most of our public infrastructure has about a 25-year lifespan. So we want to look at it all, so we're not fixing the road this year and then fixing the sidewalks next year.
And question 6, Granite Street culvert replacement.
So this question, again, was what's the reason for doing the work? This is also an area that's flooding. The road overtops pretty frequently when the stream gets so full that it overtops the road. It, again, is a highly trafficked road. And it was identified through several different initiatives by the town, including the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan, and also some of our hazard mitigation plans, as a high priority to reduce risk. So that's why this one was prioritized, and it hopefully will reduce the risk and also improve ecological value as we replace it. The culvert there is too small. This connects a wetlands area with a conservation preservation area, so we have an opportunity there to improve that. And like the other question, I think, will it be repaid when it's done? The area within the project will be repaved, but this will not cover, well, they don't have curbs out there, but full repaving of Granite Street.
Okay, thank you. Doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. Is there anything that I didn't ask that anybody here would like to cover? Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of material in a short amount of time. Just a reminder to everyone that HCAM will be archiving the video of tonight's program on their YouTube channel, and eHop will post it on our website in the next few days. And again, everything you need relating to town meeting, including dates, times, town meeting articles, you'll find all on our website at ehop.org. Thank you again to our panelists, special guests, the town manager's office, the superintendent's office, and HCAM for helping eHop make the 12th annual edition of Know Your Vote a reality. We look forward to seeing everyone at town meeting on Monday, May 6th at 7 p.m. in the middle school. Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
job.
Thank you.